Ladies and gentlemen, fellas, can you feel it? All right, we're like less than a week away right now, or right around a week, maybe a little bit more than a week. I'm getting excited, but we're like 7 to 8 to 9 days away, depending on when you're watching this, from the NFL season. And we're going to talk about my top 50 overall players, every single position thrown into that hat, thrown into the bucket, shake it all up, pull it all out, and we're going to be going through that 1 through 50 right here, right now in this here video. And what this is basically going to do is going to get you through the first 4 to 5 rounds of your draft. If you're in a 12-team draft, it gets you a little bit into the 5th round. If you're in a 5-team draft, it gets you through 5 full rounds. This is exactly how you should be starting, or at least aiming to start your draft based on this. And this is going to help you overall with draft strategy, right? Your first 5 rounds are going to be some of the most important rounds. Yes, you find the diamonds in the rough and the upside players in round 10 through 22, but those first 5 rounds, that's your foundation. You can't mess those up. If you're choosing wrong players there, or guys who are massively overrated, and you're not getting properly valued upside players, you're already setting yourself up to fail, and you're not even midway into your draft. So we'll go through those right now. We'll go about 8 guys at a time and discuss some of them. And I appreciate it if you want to hit the like button at any point during this video. And if you enjoy this, if you're brand new here, let me know in the comment section right now who is one of your favorite players to be drafting right around rounds 3 through 4 to really load up after you get your 2 studs up front. So let's start off with my top 8 players, and they are on the screen right now. And it's a lot of running backs, but it's also not a ton of just 8 straight running backs like you're going to see in a lot of your drafts. No, I don't think it's that simple this year like it probably was last year. You can see Christian McCaffrey, Zeke, Dalvin Cook to start it off. And now a lot of people are going to say, hey, they're going to go crazy. What do you mean Zeke's at 2? I get this on TikTok a lot, right? What do you mean Zeke's at number 2 and over Dalvin Cook? Listen, it's 2A, 2B. If you want to put Zeke at 3 and Dalvin Cook at 2, that's fine by me. I like Zeke's offensive line better. I like his offense better. I think in terms of overall fantasy production, similar passing backs, if not more production because of more targets and pass attempts coming Zeke's way. And I also think Zeke has, and he does, the more historical track record of staying healthy. Both of them have solid backups. I know everybody hypes up Tony Pollard. I'm sure he's a great backup, but both of them have solid backups. It is as close as it possibly gets. If it really messes with your fellas too much, put Zeke at 3 then. But for me, Zeke is my number 2 overall player. The most unlucky player in the entire red zone last year, as opposed to guys like Nick Chubb, who are being overrated this year after being the luckiest player in the red zone last year, an unsustainable pace, a 5-year high in terms of how unsustainable that was. So that's where my top 3 is. And then you see here, Aaron Jones and Alvin Kamara. A lot of people might say Alvin Kamara 2. Again, it's not that far off for me. I'm putting Alvin Kamara 5. I think he's fantastic. I think Jameis Winston getting the starting job is much better for Alvin Kamara. I mean, Jameis Winston is going to be able to open things up vertically, which leaves not only in the running game light fronts for Alvin Kamara, but also those checkdowns will be there. For Jameis Winston, who threw about 120 passes, about 18 to 20% of his passes to running backs when he threw 620 plus times in Tampa Bay 2 years ago. But he was throwing then to Dare Ogunbowale, and he was throwing to Ronald Jones and Peyton Barber, guys who are not great pass-catching running backs, like potentially the best in the NFL in Alvin Kamara. So yes, a top 5 pick for me. Aaron Jones is sandwiched in between there as my number 4 player because, look, Aaron Jones had 11 touchdowns last year in what was considered a down year for him because how much they threw in the red zone. Aaron Jones was pacing, as he has been for a few years now, averaging about 4.5 targets per game these last 2 to 3 years. What that would be this year, about an 85 target season. That's solid, but you also take 35 targets of Jamal Williams out, and I'm just not too confident A.J. Dillon is going to soak up 35 targets, or if he plays a full season, 45 to 50 targets. There's a real chance that Aaron Jones can see the 100 targets that Alvin Kamara is going to see anyways, with a lot more red zone usage because it'll be a more efficient offense. So that is where the top 5 resides, and right after those 5 running backs, it's a break for me. If I don't get one of those top 5 running backs, like if I'm picking top 5 overall, I feel secure with one of those guys. But if I'm picking 6th or 7th and those guys are off the board, maybe somebody reaches on a Derrick Henry. This is for half point and full point PPR, by the way. If you want to see those full rankings, not just my top 50, but also my non-PPR. It's all in my draft guide. It's linked down below. A chance to get it right now for free as an add-on bonus. Thanks to our sponsors. You can check it out, the Supreme Draft Guide for 2021. I have 90 running backs ranked, 125 receivers, 50 quarterbacks, and 50 tight ends. No matter how deep your draft is, 24, 26, 28 rounds, 20, whatever it is, you're going to be the most informed player in there. And these rankings, they're updated every single day. There's a bunch of other stuff. Check it all out while there's an offer potentially to get it for free. But at picks 6 and 7, it's the stud receivers players for me personally. It is Devonte Adams, it is Tyreek Hill. Because what do those guys give you? They give you security. You've seen them do it for more than 1 year, right? Like Steph Diggs, I like. He's not going to be in that tier for me at wide receiver because we've seen Devonte Adams now do this for 3 to 4 straight years. And sure, he's been banged up in there and only scored 997 yards 1 year, right? Didn't break the 1,000-yard threshold. But we've seen him do it, and we know his quarterback's been able to do it for multiple years. We've seen Tyreek Hill and Mahomes do it for multiple years. I mean, we're talking now 3 strong years of this, the production that they were able to do, Tyreek's 17 touchdown season. So those guys are going to be above some of the next players for me. Some of the next guys like a Derrick Henry, who I like much more in non-PPR. But Derrick Henry, for me, when he finishes number 3 at the running back position last year, well behind some other players like Alvin Kamara and Dalvin Cook, even though he rushes for 2,000 yards, 2,000 total yards, and 17 touchdowns, he had the best possible season he could. He had a pace last year of over a touchdown per game, and he was averaging around 135 total yards per game. If you think he could sustain that pace for every single game again this year, then he would probably be somewhere around the 5th or 6th pick in fantasy based on last year. So if you're saying you're undervaluing him, no, he had what is likely the best season of his career, one of the best rushing seasons of all time for a player, likely the best season of his personal career, and now people just want to assume that that's going to definitely happen, rinse and repeat, do it again, even though the offensive line depth has changed a little bit, even though they're clearly going a little bit more pass happy by bringing in Julio Jones, or at least attempting to do so, as their defense seems to be a bottom third in the league yet again. So that's where Derrick Henry resides for me. Now that is the top 8. Now let's slide into our next 8 players. And it starts off with some running backs, and it'll be pretty running back heavy here to start because we got through the 2 stud receivers. There's a couple of more stud receivers that'll close out this one, but Austin Eckler and Saquon Barkley. And again, this is PPR and half PPR. If you're in a non-PPR league, Austin Eckler is not in my top 10. He's not really that close to my top 10. But Austin Eckler is my top 10 player, my number 9 player over Saquon Barkley. Again, you want to flip these guys? You want to put Saquon above Derrick Henry? It's all very close based on my projections for me. This is just how it ends up washing out in a rank. Austin Eckler in a PPR format or half PPR looks fantastic for what I would consider the most improved offensive line this offseason. Chiefs got really good too, but they were already a good offensive line for 95% of the season. You get Mr. Corey Linsley. You get Mr. Rashawn Slater in the draft. That looks great. Paired up with the best second-year, best young quarterback in general in the NFL in Justin Herbert. And there's just no competition. I mean, right now you have Justin Jackson banged up in the backfield. He's not a threat. Larry Roundtree, who is one of the most unathletic ever players coming out of the draft in terms of athletical measures, and he did not look good in the preseason. And then you have Joshua Kelly, who they looked solid in the preseason. Last year did not look great at all. Had some fumbling issues, had some efficiency problems. The main story here is Austin Eckler, the only thing he does not have secured is the red zone work. And apparently he hinted on multiple podcasts within the past week that he should be seeing a little bit more usage and creativity in the red zone. But other than that, you know you're getting the efficiency. You already know that you have this Alvin Kamara upside ceiling of 100+ targets and 1,000 receiving yards because we've seen this guy already do that. So Austin Eckler for me is the guy who within the first round can really finish as the number 1 overall player this year in that offense if all clicks well and he gets the red zone work. Now number 10 is Saquon. If there was no concerns about Saquon, I know he's been practicing. I know they're saying that he's trending for week 1. That's all great. I know that we've been seeing him run and catch passes with Daniel Jones. There's a big difference from running on in a practice field and doing a couple of cuts to doing that every single play for potentially 50 to 80 offensive snaps. And of course, he doesn't have to play 100% of the snaps, but you get the point there. So Saquon for me, still a top 10 player. I just can't put him in that top 5 because there is some issues. And outside of his own health, which was a massive, 3 different things blew out in his knee, and he didn't get surgery until the end of October. So this would be a very, very quick recovery, an Adrian Peterson style recovery. But outside of the injuries, there's some major issues here with the offensive line. This offensive line is going to be bottom 5 in the league on paper heading into the year, if not the worst offensive line in the league. They've had some pieces on the line get banged up already in camp. They're depth pieces, maybe an offensive starter as well, Nate Soldier, but they've had these guys get banged up so far in camp, and it's already a bad line. So you get a bad offensive line right there for Saquon Barkley, which he's had so far in his career, just having to make do with it. You don't have Eli Manning, who is checked down for him City, basically half the amount of checkdowns and targets now since Daniel Jones has taken over for Saquon, and that's an issue. Daniel Jones is a little bit more mobile. He's more likely to scramble. He's security blanket is Sterling Shepard in this offense and not Saquon Barkley. So that is my issue. So that gets through our top 10. Then I switch quickly to just one receiver, Stefan Diggs. Stefan Diggs is kind of here by himself as a receiver because if I'm at the end of the first round, right? If I'm at the end of the first round, I'm hoping a Devonte Adams or a Tyreek falls to me at the 10-11 spot. Otherwise, I'm securing Steph Diggs. The main reason why is because Steph Diggs probably isn't there. If you pick 10th or 11th, he's probably not there in the middle of the second round or when your next pick comes around. But you know who will be there? A bunch of running backs who look pretty similar. The Naji Harris types like you can see here. A Joe Mixon. Guys that we're going to get to like Jonathan Taylors and Clyde Edwards-Hilairs and Antonio Gibsons. All those guys, for the most part, yes, some have different ceilings maybe. For the most part, they all feel pretty secure as your number 1 running back and pretty similar compared to what the wide receivers will be like left. If indeed the Steph Diggs and Ridley's go. So that's why we have Steph Diggs there. Back-to-back running backs after that close out my overall top 10 running backs, and Joe Mixon and Najee Harris. Najee Harris, one of the safest fantasy picks you're going to find this year. 3 down back with the real upside to catch 78 to 80 balls and see 100 targets with zero competition, with an offensive line that definitely comes in shaky, but was the best offensive line in the preseason, which doesn't mean much. I get that in general, but you have to at least say, yes, these players individually were playing good in the preseason. These rookies, that is encouraging signs. We then close it up with Travis Kelsey, who this one might stand out. Travis Kelsey often in drafts goes as a top 10 pick, top 8. You might even see him go as a top 5 pick because of how much he brings as an edge at the tight end position in your drafts. And I get that. I get the positional scoring advantages, especially if you're playing in a big best ball tournament with money to first. But if you're facing 9 to 11 other people or even 13 other people in your league, I'm not too enticed to go Travis Kelsey in my top 5 or top 10 picks. I mean, hell, I have him as a top 15 pick still as a tight end. But what Travis Kelsey did last year, I mean, setting the all-time record for receiving yards, leading the league in receiving, all this stuff, he had a career year at age 32. The only time that a tight end ever within the past 10 years would have paid off a top 10 overall draft pick, not Rob Gronkowski, no, he never would have, and ended up getting hurt, some seasons where it was down with the touchdowns. The only time that ever would have worked was last year with Travis Kelsey. And I get it, he's in this interesting, unique outlier situation where he's kind of the wide receiver 1A, 1B in a tight end's body with Patrick Mahomes. I get all that, but the only time that would have worked for a tight end, let alone one who's now going to be turning 33, for a top 10 pick was last year. So if you think he can just run it back again, like this Derrick Henry narrative, that these guys are just going to continue to run it back every year, that career years just don't happen once, right? When we all know on paper, when you look at the stats, you're going to have just one career year, then go ahead and take him in the top 5 or top 10 picks. I think he's a fine option. I'm just not taking him that high. And then we end up closing out the next couple of guys with DeAndre Hopkins and Ridley, because at that point, I value those receivers. Both of those two guys, they're my top 5 receivers. They close it out. I value them much more than the running backs that are left on the board. And I like getting them. And I'm not opposed to going Steph Diggs and then Calvin Ridley. And now you have 2 potential guys who can finish at 1 and 2 at the wide receiver position. You're dominating the wide receiver spot, because the main thing is, if you have Steph Diggs there at the end of the first round, if you end up going Joe Mixon instead, you're literally getting the 10th running back off the board. You're getting a bad value at running back, so you're dead last at the running back values, and then all the people after you are about to scoop up all the top end, tight end, and wide receiver values. So now you're always playing catch up. I'd rather get on the offensive and start to get an edge at a position. And as we go 17 to 24 on the screen, you can see I'm still trying to get an edge at the position. DK Metcalf, who has number 1 overall wide receiver upside, no motherfucking doubt about it, starts it off at my number 17 pick. And then you get some running backs. And then it goes pretty heavy running back here. I mean, Antonio Gibson, Taylor, Nick Chubb, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, those guys are all strong second-round picks. If you get a stud running back in round 1, I personally like going like 2 to 3 receivers in a row after that. But if you're somebody who likes going back-to-back running backs, these would be the guys that I'm targeting in that second round. I would not be targeting anybody else. I'm not going after DeAndre Swift in the second round. I'm not going after the Gus Edwards and the James Robinsons who have now moved up, the Chris Carsons. I'm not going after them. I want difference makers, guys whose ceiling are easily top 5 running back. I see that for Jonathan Taylor, Antonio Gibson, Nick Chubb, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Now, I will say, Nick Chubb for many people, in a standard league, Nick Chubb for me is probably my top 5, top 6, right around my RB6, I believe, in non-PPR. This is not non-PPR. In PPR formats, Nick Chubb for me is my running back 13. In half point, he's right around my running back 9. He was the luckiest running back last year. I get this narrative all the time. Oh, but Nick Chubb in 12 games, he was averaging this many touchdowns and this and this. Yes, Nick Chubb was having an outlier performance for the season for 12 games. So people just want to assume in the final 4 games he would have continued to produce at an unsustainable rate, and then they want to assume that this year he's going to produce at an unsustainable rate. That was the highest touchdown rate on a per touch basis in the last 5 years. You think that same guy is going to do it again? I get it. The offensive line is fantastic, but he has no passing down work. He is a 2 down back. Kareem Hunt is a 3rd down back. That limits Nick Chubb's upside to be a top 5 running back in PPR formats. A target is worth 2.75 times more than a carry over the last 5 years in fantasy. Why? Because it's a lot easier to get overall yards after contact and touchdowns, and also you get a point per that reception from a target than it is from an attempt. Nick Chubb, probably the most talented running back in the league, top 2, top 3, but the problem for fantasy football is his skill sets don't mesh that well with half point and full point PPR. You get Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He seems to be fully healthy. The ankle issue is not that big of a deal. I'm fine getting him as my RB1, right? If you start off Devonte Adams, you come back around, you have Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Feel pretty strong about that. Back-to-back running backs, whatever it might be. Darren Waller here, if you're trying to get that stud tight end number 2, pretty standard spot where he goes. I'm right around consensus. And then I close it up with my wide receivers 7 and 8 in my rankings, and that is going to be Keenan Allen and Terry McLaurin. Keenan Allen I love. Keenan Allen is massively underrated, goes off the board as like wide receiver 11, wide receiver 12. He's my wide receiver 7. He was second behind only Devonte Adams in overall opportunity and target share at the the wide receiver position last year, averaging 10.5 targets per game. The guy continues to be on the field no matter what it is. 2 wide receiver sets, 3 wide receiver sets. He'll move into the slot. He's dominating. He's fantastic. This guy only produces every single year. And there's a narrative out there, but Keenan Allen's injury prone. Keenan Allen has been the 3rd healthiest wide receiver over the last 4 years, only missing 4 games over the last 4 full seasons. Because he tore his ACL 6 years ago and had a freak injury 7 years ago, does not mean that those injuries are affecting him right now. That's what modern day medicine does. It makes your body stronger than when you actually got hurt. And he's been the healthiest, the 3rd healthiest wide receiver these last 4 years. So don't let anybody tell you, Keenan Allen's injury prone. No, you're anchoring on something that happened almost a fucking decade ago at this point. Move on, guy. Stop turning around. What is it saying? Stop looking backwards. You're going to fuck your neck up. You're fucking your neck up. Cut that shit out. So about halfway done, we're going to go 25 to 32. If you're enjoying this, I assume you're getting value. You're drafting tonight and tomorrow, a couple days from now. These are your first 4 to 5 rounds of your draft. So be sure to take advantage of it. If you want the exact rankings, you can X guys off as you go, all that type of stuff. Check it out in the draft guide below and take a second of your time and do hit that like button. I really do appreciate that. So right here, we get more wide receivers because this is where running backs start to dry up. I mean, we're through like my top 14 running backs at this point, and a lot of guys, literally like running back 15 for me, I believe, is Chris Carson. He's not on this list, but like the Chris Carson, I mean, you can go all the way to Damian Harris, like a 10 running back tier right there of guys who just kind of all look the same. Some of them have a little bit of pass catching upside. I know DeAndre Swift is in there, although banged up right now. So some of them are a tiny bit different. Most of them, though, they're going to be 2 to 3 down backs who have a moderate amount of pass catching upside, decent red zone work, but they don't have that ceiling. And that's why they're not in the top 14 running backs. And that's why they're not in my top 32 players, as you can see right here. So this is all wide receivers and a tight end. So Amari Cooper right now is getting the bump down, right? The bump down right now in the preseason because of Hard Knocks. And of course, he's not on the field as much, so he's not being shown on Hard Knocks as much. Dak Prescott getting the bump down because you get to see a little bit more about his shoulder, even though I don't think it's that much of an issue. Amari played in a preseason game. So I think Amari's fully healthy if he played in a preseason game. Well, no football player is probably fully healthy, but as healthy as you can be. Amari Cooper was much better than CeeDee Lamb last year overall. Amari Cooper's a top 10 receiver for me, but Lamb goes ahead of him in drafts. He was better than CeeDee Lamb last year with Dak Prescott, a built-in chemistry. Amari Cooper is still a stud receiver in this league. On paper, probably a top 10. I like CeeDee Lamb. As you can see, he's on this list as a top 30 player for me, a guy that I feel confident in drafting in the 3rd round, but I'll take Amari over him. A.J. Brown is there, who's not really practicing it in camp right now, but doesn't seem to be a concern. He's kind of in one practice every 2 to 3 weeks. Seems to be no issues, though, based on what the reports are. You get Allen Robinson, my wide receiver 11, who is just so consistent. And now he gets Andy Dalton, which is the best quarterback he's played with, which is a concern. But then he'll get Justin Fields, so you hope for a little bit more accuracy. Fields was very accurate in college. So I like Allen Robinson. If you can start your draft off, right? If you start at the end of the draft, say you're and also know your league. Like I have 6 flex spots in my home league, or I have 4 flex spots so I can start 6 receivers if I wanted to. So know your league. You can get an advantage there by drafting 6 receivers in a row if you really wanted to, right? That might sound crazy, but you have the best receivers right there. Sure, you have to patch together running back, but you only have to patch together 2. You have 6 strong receivers. You could realistically start with Devonte Adams, Calvin Ridley, and then Allen Robinson. 3 strong. You wouldn't be shocked if they all finish top 10. They're all right around ranked there. And then you get Justin Jefferson, who easily could be the number 1 overall player this year. There is some concern about his injury, though, right? Like he doesn't play in the preseason. They try to downgrade the injury, and I think they are to an extent. He's expected to play week 1. We're still like a week away, but there's some concerns there, which I think is holding me to not make him a top 10 receiver. He's right around my wide receiver 12. CeeDee Lamb is there. These Rams guys who I'm very high on, it's a coin flip here. My number 30 and 31 players, Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods, right? I mean, Robert Woods, some days I'm like, I want to put him up there because Cooper Kupp might come off the field a lot more in 2 wide receiver sets, but now with not as much of a run game there and a featured run game without Cam Akers, you're going to get a lot more 3 wide receiver sets for Matthew Stafford, similar to what he saw in Detroit, especially early on in his career. But both of these guys I expect to win a lot. I expect both these guys to continue to be top 10 yards after the catch receivers, which gives them ceilings. I expect them to both see 125 plus targets apiece, be really the only options in this passing game outside of targets here and there for Tyler Higbee, some targets out of the backfield, but not a ton for those guys. So flip a coin between Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods. I would say that Cooper Kupp probably has a higher ceiling as a better red zone player. Robert Woods' ceiling comes from maybe the overall volume of seeing 15 more targets. What can he do with those? And then we close out this group of players to my 32nd overall player, which is George Kittle. And I'm a little bit lower than market, so you probably don't get him here, but I'm fine with that. I don't really want George Kittle this year. I'm going to be honest with you. Even if he's on the board in the 3rd round for me and I'm picking at the end of the 3rd round, if there's a decent receiver that falls like a Robert Woods or a Kupp, I'm taking him over him. Because look, Kittle's in an offense that has Jimmy G, who I personally think is going to start for a while. Trey Lance had not looked that great in the regular season. Lance will be in on these packages or in the preseason. So then it comes down to how good is this team? I mean, if San Fran starts 6-2, Jimmy G is going to continue to be the starter. If they start 2-3, well then yeah, they're probably going to transition to Trey Lance and see what they can do, because this isn't a team that is ready to win right now. But either way, you now have this new alpha. Yes, a better overall target, number one, in Brandon Ayuk in this offense. And then if it ever switches to the mobile quarterback and Trey Lance, who does have obviously a big arm, well, now you have a rookie mobile quarterback who you're hoping can sustain 2 options, if not 3 with Deebo Samuel. And I don't really see that. I think it hurts all of them. But if anything, George Kittle is now the number 2 option in his own offense, but he's still being drafted as a number 1 option. So my 32nd rank is going to be below the market. We now get into 33 through 40. So we're well more than halfway done here. Now some running backs start to pop back up. The end of the 3rd round to the beginning of the 4th is where I start to feel comfortable drafting some of these running backs, because the wide receivers start to weed out. My top 15 or so wide receivers are off the board. So it starts with Chris Carson, who a lot of people ask me my opinions on these next 2 guys. Chris Carson and Montgomery. You can see 33 and 34. This is the middle of the 4th round in a 10-team league, the end of the 3rd round in a 12-team league. And I don't really have a strong opinion on these guys. I mean, they're the clear running back ones in their offense. They both have question marks from a receiving game. David Montgomery did shrink down last year, got smaller, and became a little bit more agile, especially in the receiving game. So that's good, right? Tariq Cohen's banged up. They do bring in Damian Williams. We'll see what happens with Khalil Herbert on the rookie on their roster, but David Montgomery, the firm guy, and that's why he is, for me, a top 20 running back. Chris Carson, there's not much sex appeal here. Chris Carson, he's going to probably get hurt at some point just by the way that he runs, but he's more involved in the passing game now. Hell, he might be the 3rd option ahead of Gerald Everett in this passing game, since they don't really have a wide receiver 3. I know Dwayne Eskridge is there. He's still in the pup list as a rookie. Not really worried about him. David Moore got shipped out to Carolina to be now a reserve player behind rookie Terrace Marshall there. So Chris Carson, I do think, is a solid player, but there's not really much of an opinion. Yeah, he's probably going to see 14 carries a game. Yeah, he'll probably see 3 targets a game. Does he stay healthy? Well, yeah, he'll probably finish running back 15 or so. Like, there's just not much there for me. It's not exciting. It's not sexy. I don't think there's much of a ceiling outside of touchdowns. And the same exact analysis could be there for David Montgomery. He's a strong 2-down back. Does he keep up that 3rd down usage, especially if Justin Fields takes over, who's a more mobile-friendly quarterback who's not going to check down as much? So that's where these guys land for me. Then it's some receivers who I'm fine getting these receivers as my wide receiver 3 or 4. I really don't want them as my wide receiver 2. So I'm not trying to draft 3 running backs in a row to start this year. It just doesn't look great because wide receivers really go off the board quick, and then there's kind of a massive tier drop. Deontay Johnson, my wide receiver 16. Chris Godwin, Tyler Lockett, and Julio. That takes me to my wide receiver 20 and my top 38 players. Interchange these guys if you like. I like Deontay Johnson. Even though they're going to run more, he's not going to come off the field in 2 wide receiver sets. It's going to hurt Juju and Chase Claypool, who in the preseason were coming off the field while Deontay was staying on for basically every single snap with Big Ben. Big Ben's shoulder looked a little bit better, which is nice. And if the offensive line can improve at all from last year, you're going to see more downfield usage for Deontay. Don't be worried about the drops. Drops are not sticky. Amari Cooper, Odell Beckham Jr., these have been guys who have led the league in drops in their career at some point. Even Jarvis Landry, one of the best sure hand receivers in the league, has been up there. And those things just don't stick. It's not a sticky stat. What is sticky is you getting open and being able to secure targets. That is the hard part, and he's able to do that all the time. The easy part is catching the ball. I'm not too concerned about an NFL receiver like him, a good one, catching the ball. Godwin's here, who I'm lower on than market because there's just 3 strong receivers, a stronger 2 to 3 strong tight ends in Tampa Bay. I don't really want to be drafting Godwin as a top 15 guy like he goes. Same thing for Mike Evans, who have you not actually seen yet in my ranks because I'm very low on him. Tyler Lockett, I mean, safe as it gets. People want to say, but Tyler Lockett, he has these peaks and valleys. He had a 20-target game. Okay, so people, first of all, they want to make it seem like it's a bad thing that this player possesses the massive ceiling. But then he stunk for a couple of games. It is not sticky, right? It is not a consistent thing. It is not going to be sustainable for a player to be inconsistent if they continue to see borderline top 10 usage in targets. He was number 5 last year in receptions and number 11 in targets. That is sticky. If you're getting the volume, you're going to continue to be a top wide receiver, where he finished top 12 last year. Him having these peaks and valleys is not consistent. There's no rhyme or reason to it. It's not like he's taking off games. And the other thing people always forget is when injuries occur. If a player plays in games, people just assume that he was healthy. Tyler Lockett, the second half of last year, was injured every single game. I mean, if you watch any film or actually follow these injury reports, he was missing every practices. He was suiting up for the games. They were saying that he was 50 to 75% himself. So if you want to look at the last 8 to 9 games of the year on his box scores, that's going to be a major reason why when you have 50 to 75% Tyler Lockett out there. Let other people pass on him and get a fantastic option in your 4th or 5th rounds. Julio is here. I mean, yeah, he could finish as a top 5 receiver or top 10 receiver again. It is clearly a run-first offense. He is clearly behind A.J. Brown in this receiving core. It would have to be mega efficient for all these guys to hit. So I'm lower on Julio than the market. And then we finish it up to my overall 40 players with James Robinson and Mike Davis. Robinson takes a massive bump, but no Travis Etienne. I don't care if Carlos Hyde was on the field in the preseason for a certain amount of snaps. They wanted to rotate both backs with the offense. James Robinson is the better player. He is much better in pass protection. He is much more athletic. I mean, he's 10 years younger, and he's a much better pass catcher right now. Yes, there's a connection with Urban Meyer and Carlos Hyde, but that stuff gets weeded out. Just like Tim Tebow got cut having a connection because he's not great, same thing's going to happen with Carlos Hyde. But Carlos Hyde is great. No, he's not. He is a 3.8 yards per carry guy at this point in his career with no pass catching upside. And then I am much higher than Mike Davis here, and he's my 40th overall player. You don't have to take him 40th overall. He goes to the 6th round often. So if you're in a 10-team league, the 60s, right? So he goes there often. But this is where I have him ranked based on my projections. Nobody in this backfield. The only guy that people thought, 180-pound satellite back in Javion Hawkins, undrafted player out of Louisville this past year, running back, they thought that he might be a threat here. He ends up getting cut. There's nobody here. Cuadrey Olsen, a couple of years back, he went to Pittsburgh in college. He's just basically closer to a fullback than anything. They cut Ito Smith. They cut Tony Brooks-James. These were guys in this backfield. I mean, those guys were all cut. That was like their only depth chart heading into this year. Those were guys that they thought they can rely on. All cut. Nobody left there but Mike Davis. And Mike Davis, I get it. He's an older back, 28 and a half years old. But in the 5th or 6th round, if you can get him there, I'm fine with that because he's the only running back on this offense. Yes, there's a sketchy offensive line, but they're going to check the ball down. They're probably going to check it down a decent amount. So we like Mike Davis. And now, 41 through 50 is on the board. My final guys all the way to my top 50 players. Get you through your first 4 to 5 rounds of your draft. Hey, people, beautiful people, ladies, gentlemen, fellas, we made it. Please do hit the like button. Football is here. How you doing? I'm really excited for this season. I mean, I love the preseason. We ended up winning like $23,000+ in the preseason in profits on betting in DFS. It was a ton of fun. We now head into the regular season for that. I'll be dropping videos every single day, so be sure to hit the follow and the subscribe button, actually, and notification bell let you know when we're dropping videos. So, 41, a couple of guys here, and then we get, finally, you're saying now to the quarterbacks, yes. Miles Sanders, DeAndre Swift. DeAndre Swift is my running back 19 or 20 right now. He will jump to running back 15 as long as we see that he's fully healthy. Bad offense, but a strong offensive line. Massive upside to catch 60 to 80 plus balls, 100 targets. He's going to jump right back up. I just have to see that he's actually going to play week 1 or week 2 because right now, apparently, he's iffy. He has not stepped on a practice field yet, and we are, as I check my watch, that's not there on my fucking arm, my wrist, a flick of the wrist. Yeah, we're like 8 days away from the start of the season, and this guy's still not ready. So that's the only hold up there. He will move up for me. And then quarterbacks. Picks 43 overall for me. 247 is 5 quarterbacks. And no, I am not the number 1 player, Patrick Mahomes. No, it's not that cookie cutter. My quarterbacks go like this, my top 5. Kyler Murray, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, and Dak Prescott. You have to put a premium on the rushing upside. Kyler Murray was going to break Lamar Jackson's and then Patrick Mahomes from a few years back's fantasy football scoring record if it wasn't for his shoulder injury the final 4 weeks of the season. He was well on pace. He was scoring 24 fantasy points a game. He was an absolute monster. Why? Because he wasn't that great in the air, I'll be honest with you. Was not that great, although now has upgraded weapons. You hit the upgrade button on Larry Fitzgerald and turn him into Rondale Moore. You hit the upgrade button on guys that were playing on the outside a lot, like Andy Isabella at times last year, and some other just no-name players, and you hit that button, Trent Sherfield, and you hit the upgrade button, and now it's AJ Green, who, yes, he's older, but now is a wide receiver too, going to see a good amount of targets. We'll take that. And oh yeah, the massive rushing yards for Kyler Murray, the massive rushing upside. So he's my quarterback 1. And this is the thing. I'm probably not taking one of these quarterbacks in a lot of drafts because you have to take them in the 5th round. But if you were to start your draft 3 wide receivers in a row, 3 studs, and then a 4th round running back falls to you of a David Montgomery caliber, and you wanted to go Kyler Murray and just get a big advantage at that position, I wouldn't hate you for it. But I usually wait a little bit because in rounds 10, you can honestly get Jalen Hurts. In rounds 12 and 14, you can get the Trevor Lawrences and the Trey Lances and the Justin Fields. So if you can just wait 9 more rounds for guys who potentially have similar upside, uncapped upside, or close to it, I usually like to take that discount personally. But you cannot downgrade the upside and the advantage of having those elite quarterbacks with the rushing upside. Josh Allen is going to be there yet again, not only from a passing perspective, when they throw a ton, they throw so much, but also the rushing in the red zone. Lamar Jackson, not much to say there, sets a record for red zone carries, rushing yards, rushing attempts for a quarterback the last 2 years. Then I get to Mahomes. If you're in a 6-point passing touchdown league, yeah, you can bump him up a little bit, but otherwise, these other guys just have much more passing upside or rushing upside than him. And then Dak Prescott at my 47th overall player. I know there's concerns right now with Dak's shoulder. He's not going to be 100% all year long. If he's not going to be 100% all year long, that's fine. But is he going to be 90% Dak? Is he going to be there on every single play outside of the 60-yard bomb that he has to throw 1 time per year? Because then I'll be fine on Dak Prescott. Because Dak Prescott, to me right now, you're getting as a nice value in drafts because of hard knocks and everything coming out about his shoulder. But he's throwing in practices. He's throwing full on. He's throwing 25-plus yard passes. He's dropping back. He's doing everything in the motions for it. He could have played in the preseason game if it was a real game, they said. I'm not concerned about it. He's going to start week 1. He's going to look himself. We're going to be fine here, guys. He slots in behind Mahomes for me because I just think that Mahomes is a better, more consistent quarterback and doesn't have any type of concerns in terms of injury right now and a little bit more mobile upside, but they're very similar players in terms of fantasy on how they score points. They'll have a little bit of rushing upside, especially in the red zone, and they're going to throw the ball 35 to 45, probably closer to 40 times times per game. And then it closes out with my 48 through 50, and now a large tier of wide receivers is going to go here. Mike Evans, I'm much lower on. You're never going to get Mike Evans if you follow my tiers, and that's a good thing. Mike Evans goes as a top 14, top 12 wide receiver right now, I believe. This is a guy who last year survived on touchdowns. He had his lowest ever targets in a season, lowest ever target share in a season. Yeah, 7 years of 100,000 yards and 7 touchdowns or more, whatever it was, right? I get that. It was fantastic. 7 straight years of that, the double-digit touchdowns all these years. It's fantastic, but that stuff always usually comes to an end. And what better time to come to an end than when you have Chris Godwin and, yes, motherfucking Antonio Brown, who led this team in target share last year when he came to the team. Mike Evans, lowest ever career year for targets, but at a career high in touchdowns. That's not sustainable, right? Touchdowns are random. I know Mike Evans is going to be a target in the red zone, but if you're going to drop yet again in targets with Antonio Brown now there for a full season and Gronk coming into his own, and oh yeah, OJ Howard is now back into this offense, and they bring in Giovanni Bernard out of the backfield, they're improving a lot of stuff here at other positions in their depth while bringing everybody else back. Drops Mike Evans for me. DJ Moore, who I'm fine on, just can't get too high because Robbie Anderson's clearly out there. I'm high on Terrace Marshall, so I don't have much left for DJ Moore compared to these other guys up here. And then number 50 for me, who you can usually get in like the 6th round, T. Higgins, who I think is the wide receiver 1 on Cincinnati. I have him ranked ahead of Jamar Chase, the rookie, because T. Higgins last year broke out, not just with Joe Burrow, but players that were replacing Joe Burrow in the last 6 games of the year and still producing massive wide receiver 1 numbers. T. Higgins is a monster. The man out of Clemson. I love T. Higgins, my number 50 overall player. So that's where we're at. Those are my top 50 players. And I thank you for staying tuned here. Hopefully this type of video is very helpful. I'm not sure if a lot of people do these types of videos, but I'm trying to get creative with the content we're putting out here. And if you enjoyed this, check out a lot of other of my videos that I have. Fantasy Football 2021 playlist. As of my recording of this, check the date of it, I'll be releasing in a day or two from now my updated and my final running back tiers list for my top 50 or top 25 running backs, and then my final tiers list at the wide receiver position. More videos coming out up and until the start of the season, and then every day after that, I specialize in daily fantasy sports and sports betting, so a lot of content will be there, but we will also have some season-long in terms of start, sit, and waiver wires, and all that type of stuff. Follow me on TikTok for more, and hey, before you go, hit the like and subscribe, and check out that draft guide down below. A chance to get it for free. Not just these top 50. My top 200 is in there. 90 running backs, 125 receivers, 50 tight ends, and 50 quarterbacks, all ranked for a bunch of different scoring formats. Check it all out and more down below. You all rock. See you in the next one. Top 50 is done. Fantasy Football 2021 is motherfucking here. Go dominate. Go dominate your draft. Smack your league mates around with the knowledge you just got. Punch them if you want to, but smacks are a little bit more, lighter. A little bit more playful, but you're still going to knock them dead in these drafts. Go get it, fellas. Go get it, ladies. See you in the next one.